I'd like to, in the brief time provided, talk about what I call a universal human equity and a need for holistic vision. So why we need universal human equity? When we don't have human equity, it'll become an issue both for human rights as well as religious freedom. And this higher purpose, which should be the goal for all human beings' prosperity, it is required here and now on earth, not a promise of future, but here and now on earth. And this requires a leadership role in solving all the disparities that cannot be solved by individual entities on their own. So let's define the problem. So what is universal human equity that we are talking about? Now, of course, there's a larger time scale, but let's call it 2020 years later. We have so many disparities in terms of divisiveness, as Mr. Siddiqui explained. We have racial disparities, or I will call it inequities, gender inequities, socioeconomical, geographical, cultural, religious, health, justice, and even basic needs. It goes on. The number of divisive reasons goes on. Now, as recently as we saw, when we have all these inequities, major calamities like tsunamis or the pandemic that just happened, they amplify, they widen the wounds because they exploit these inequities that exist. For example, even though powerful nations with a lot of money, secular and capitalist countries have a lot of money to go and buy a lot of vaccines that's out there. That creates inequity for those who cannot afford, like, for example, South Africa. Apart from underprivileged not getting vaccinated, what happens is if the powerful get vaccinated, those mutations that come out of South Africa come back and affect us. So because we are all a very connected world, so you have to look at inequities and you have to solve for everybody and not just the secular and powerful capitalistic. In addition, our societies, even though we are a very connected world, there's one internet, one Twitter, one Facebook, etc., one platform. However, we are such a disconnected society, because anywhere in the world, we can sit here and then cause a damage somewhere. Somebody sitting at the opposite end of the world can cause disruption anywhere else. Think about the modern example of what is happening in Bitcoin. When the banks go away, when the bank's deposit goes away, certain securities goes away, anybody with digital currency can create a lot of havoc in terms of cryptocurrency and whatnot. It can divide us more. All of these, obviously in the ecosystem, they marginalize human beings, they create an imbalance in the environment, and that creates a lot of issues. Now, as an individual being, the self-worth, the self-confidence, that seems to be almost a privilege now rather than being a norm. And that impacts everybody. If you humiliate somebody, that is bigger than hurting somebody physically. So you have to make sure everybody feels good about themselves. And a lot of the privileges nowadays seems to be only the top 2% or top 1%, whatever you might call. And the equal potential for everybody is missing. And that is what is causing the universal inequity. So the question is, can we solve a lot of these problems individually, or should there be a collective solution? Now, Mr. Siddiqui talked about a great concept of state and religion separation. Now, I would like to reference and bring about a lot more strategic influences that are out there that are playing in the same common field. You have geopolitical interests, you have individual worldviews, each one, conservative versus liberal versus left versus whatnot. You have multi-religions and multi-goals, right? Some want to create solutions here and now, some for future, some may be a combination of now and future. Then you have constitutions. A constitution in one country is not the same as the other. The human right in one country is not same as human right in another country. So, and you have various means and ends, various beliefs, practices, it goes on, social hierarchies, and conflicting sources of income, some ethical, some non-ethical. and then it goes on. So the issue is when you have so many strategic influences. Now think about the earth. The air we breathe is the same. The water that flows is the same. The laws of gravity is the same. So when all of these laws of nature are the same, shouldn't the human being, a rational thinking human being, shouldn't there be an uniformity, an equity of joy and peace and harmony on earth? Um, and the issue that becomes is if we try to solve these problems for, like in the religious, certain, like a promise of future, then we leave a lot of conundrums of human inequities here on the earth. So we cannot solve these problems individually. So if you try to solve geopolitical interest, the inequity goes on in another tower. So the issue is that what we need is we need a solution here and now, and we know what we need. It's not like we don't know what to do, but what we are lacking because of so many strategic influences and so many differing means and methods, what we are missing is an integrated principle. So it is coming together, all of these things. If you look at it, everybody needs to come together. It's a joint responsibility. It cannot be solved just by one. So I think it's important that we define the problem. We recognize the forces behind what is causing inequities, and then come up with, it's almost like you have all these pillars, but we don't have a roof over our heads. That is what is happening. So we know the end goal, but we are missing. It needs to be combined, integrated, and unconstrained by time and place. It is not something we will solve for later, because every generation is coming to this world. Let's look at an example. You could be a great swimmer. You could be a race car driver. You could be a javelin thrower or a sprinter or a skier or a tennis player. A lot of great skills individually, just like all those other pillars. Each one might have great strengths. But while we respect our individuality and freedom, like in certain societies, not all societies have the same individualness, right? We need to come together, as I talked about, from an integrated principle, the format, to create and sustain the universal health equity that I'm talking about. And because all of these help everybody in their own way, but we need a symbiotic coming together platform that is required, because every generation, a generation is coming on earth, and then one generation is going away, and another generation is comes after them. So the solution is we need a platform. What sort of a platform? Just imagine, just like a ice skating ring. Even though you can swim, you can ski, you cannot do all of those on ice skating ring. You cannot sprint, of course. If you're a pro, you could say so. You cannot drive like a race car. You need to collectively work together, collectively behave together, set a set of principles. Now, this is the ice skating ring that we need on earth here and now, so that when future generations come, no matter the individual unique skills, they come together, they live in harmony, they respect each other with a mutual respect. No matter what those differences are in those each of those pillars, they need a uniformity. So without that uniform behavior, we cannot solve the problem for future. And for peace and harmony, to create that human equity, we need that uniformity that is generated by all of us. Um, this I would recommend, and I would prefer, and I'll, people might have different views, but let me share an example of what is that integrated principle, and we need to develop more of those integrated principles, no matter where it comes from or what the background is. So let's take nonviolence for example. Again, hurt or violence could be at any level: intellectual, emotional, physical, and whatnot, right? So as you know, nobody wants to get hurt. Even an ant doesn't want to get hurt. If you put a finger, it goes around you. Even a robber doesn't want to get cheated, or nobody wants to be. So nobody wants to get hurt, right, in this world. So what we have when we say Sanatana Dharma, it is an eternal way of living. Sanatana Dharma is interpreted as a Hindu religion, even though it could be. So again, yoga and meditation, these integrated principles came from the same Sanatana Dharma. As many of you know, yoga today in commercially, it's a $12 billion industry commercially. But anyway, individually, it helps purify and perfect within ourselves. So this one integrated principle, understanding that, hey, you should not hurt anybody in anything that you do in all of those pillars. Let's not forget those pillars. All of them have a collective responsibility. When we do something, we should not hurt anybody intellectually, nor emotionally, nor physically, because that is what that behavior creates the human equity. I'll share a few examples. I won't go through each one of them. As my a friend described in India, as you know, of course, there are aberrations, issues. Uh, People create evils, whatnot. But you may know in India, we have about 195 to 200 uh, Muslims living in India. That's almost two-thirds of America, total American population, right? More or less, everybody is being living peacefully. Some examples, like for example, in a city called Banaras, one society makes garments, the other takes it, they sell it, they protect each other. In fact, there are festivals and um, cultures and food. Everybody takes care of each other at the grassroots level. Musical tradition is one great where Hindus learn from Muslims and Muslims learn from Swami. So there's a very integrated what we call as Vasudeva Kutumbakam, meaning um, treating the whole world, both inner things and human beings, as one family with mutual respect. When I say integrated principle, these are the sort of principles that, in order to create human equity, that we need. Finally, what I would like to conclude is, when we talk about human equity, it requires oneness and collaboration. Collaboration is so important. Um, Again, we could have individual goals for whatnot. That is fine, but we have to say, if we have to create peace and harmony for this generation and future generation on earth, no matter what our goals are in the next life or a different world or life after death, that is all fine. But our priority to solve all the evils that we are seeing in the world here, all the violence, all the disparities, all the discriminations, it requires a platform, an integrated principle that everybody needs to commit to. Without that, if we work in our individual silos, um, each goals and objective might be affecting somebody. State affects religion, because me as an individual, when state and religion, their differences, it is me as an individual who gets impacted by same thing like an economy, et cetera, et cetera. So hopefully you get so hopefully the point is clear. For peace and oneness, we need an integrated principle being collaborated. And there's many examples from, I would say, probably many religions, but we need to agree and commit and collaborate and agree on what problem we need to solve. We know what needs to be solved. It's just a matter of coming together and how to solve it. So if we take this universal human equity as the ultimate goal, not agendas of each pillar, then we can create peace on earth. Otherwise, individually trying to solve problems, I'm afraid to say we won't be able to solve it. So